moment, please. We're going to look today at the Gospel of Matthew. Matthew chapter 5, if you'll turn there, please. If you have a Bible that's still in print. Or you want to go to your app. That's cool too. And we're going to read a few verses together from Matthew 5:13. Really great verses of the scripture. I love this because this is so New Testament. You've had all the Old Covenant, the Old Testament, and all the teachings in there, and all the types, the analogies. Now we come to Jesus, who is speaking, who's the Son of God, the Son of Man, and he says these words, "You are the salt of the earth." Verse 13, Matthew chapter 5. You are the salt of the earth. Can you say that to someone next to you? You are the salt of... Take a good look at them. You're looking at salt in front of you. You are a salty person. Yeah. That means that you can really add to the flavor of the world around you. Okay? You are salt. You are the salt of the earth. Do you remember that saying we used to say, oh, the great people, those are the salt of the earth? We used to say that, didn't we? Still say it now. You're the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It's no longer good for anything except it be thrown out and trampled by men. Then he says, you are the light of the world. Say to someone, you are the light of the world. The person next to you is radiant. Even on a Sunday morning. Even on a Monday morning. Uh-oh. You are the light of the world. A city on a hill cannot be hidden. Can I have my first slide, please, Sonia? Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on a stand and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before men that they may see your good deeds and praise your Father who is in heaven. Fantastic verses from Jesus there. And my title this morning is Living on a Hill. Jesus talked about a city being on a hill, and he was speaking prophetically, because I noticed at the time that Jesus spoke these words, it was actually pre-church. It was pre the day of Pentecost, therefore, pre-church. It was actually, probably, in many respects, pre-discipleship. I said the other week that church does not make disciples. Disciples make disciples. On Monday, I was at the Footsteps course where Nancy, Phil, Claire and Phil Smith gathered, and it was the 9th week of that particular course. I would really recommend, if you're a new Christian, or even if you've been a Christian some time, but you really need to understand your faith and the roots of your faith more, Footsteps is great for you. So if you enroll in the next one, it would be fantastic. And there are several people who will be certificated who have done the 9-week course. And we had a great Q&A session on Monday evening. It was fantastic. It's something that we will probably end up doing a few more Q&As, because it was really good. So that is something I would say, discipleship. So Jesus spoke these words even before the church had been formed, before disciples or new believers had been made disciples even. And Jesus comes out with this teaching. Jesus didn't teach like point 1, point 2, point 3, point 4. He spoke about the things that people saw in everyday life. And there were hundreds of people, if not thousands, listening to this message. And Jesus spoke about the salt and the light in such a way. And he says he says, a city on a hill cannot be hidden. A lamp on a stand is seen by everyone. And I want to speak about living on the hill today, because I think it's really, really important that we understand what Jesus is drawing us into in this teaching here. On Tuesday, I had the privilege of going and speaking to some of the Winton kids. What a privilege that was. I felt a bit like Daniel in the lion's den at first, but nevertheless, it was great. And often when you speak to kids, and not just kids, but adults as well, they often come out with that thing, I'm a Christian, I was born a Christian. And it's amazing how many people still think that in our nation. And they always say, well, you can't be born a Christian any more than you can be born a brain surgeon, or a doctor, or a carpenter for that matter, or a mechanic. You have to decide to become one. And I shared about that stuff. Jesus was sharing with us about not being insular as a people, but being people who shine outwardly what is inside. And you know, before Brexit and before the referendum and before all that stuff and before the other stuff that happened yesterday in America, the Lord put within me a word way before any of this happened, and it was this: what is inside of humanity is about to come out. And I told a few people beforehand, and I even did not fly to a certain city in Turkey called Istanbul, pulled the plug on that flight, and just a few days later they had the incident after I'd actually said, I'd predicted that there was going to be a major incident there. But I felt the Lord really spoke to me and told me that the things that were in man and in humanity were about to break out and break forth. And we haven't seen the end of it yet. But I'll tell you now, whatever we see now, hatred, evil, anger, frustration, don't kid yourself, it's always been there. What's happened now is it's been loosed. Things have triggered it, but it was already there. Jesus said, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. And what was in the heart has got to come out. And I'm saying to us as Christians today, if Jesus is in your life, then the only thing that can come out of that is light and salt that affects people for the better and for the good. Hear me, church. Hear me. If you squeeze an orange, what do you get? If you squeeze a Christian, what do you get? Christ. Or can I say it another way? You should do. You should do. James talks about sweet water and bitter water coming from the same source. He says it should not be. Unfortunately, it is sometimes. But here we are in this amazing bit of teaching from Jesus, who is talking about the people he wants to be, who are kingdom people, yeah? Because this is all teaching about the kingdom. We've had, first of all, the blessed attitudes. Blessed are those. Blessed are those. Those are what we call the beatitudes, the blessed attitudes. That's the code for our living as Christians and as believers and followers of Jesus Christ. But Jesus is saying, listen, I want you not only to live by this code and by this lifestyle, but I want you to live it out loud where people can see it and hear it. I don't want you to be tucked away. Most people live in the valley. If you look at the topography of any nation, you will see most of the towns and cities are in the valleys where it's fertile and everything's going on. You won't find many cities on a hill. But Jesus said, be a city on a hill. And I looked at cities on the hill, and you know, I went round them. There's quite a few actually. But I thought to myself, oh, you Dumbo. The first city on the hill was Jerusalem. It's a city on the Mount of God. It was David who said, let us go up to the mountain and take the stronghold. And Jerusalem is the epitome of a city that cannot be ignored in the world. Isn't it amazing that Jerusalem is seen by every nation of the world and still is fighting for its own existence? Yeah? But it's a city on a hill. It's an example of how the Lord wants us to be, not down in the valleys where we cannot be seen, but on the mountaintop where we cannot be ignored. Wow. In other words, we should have a witness, said the Lord, that can't be ignored. People know people by their jobs a lot, don't they? Have you noticed that? People know one another by... I was saying before, if you have the name Smith, you come from a long line of people who used to put the hooves on horses' feet. Yeah. Phil, it's Jones. By Jones. Jones is... I forgot what that one was now. Jones. The butcher, I think. I don't know. But people's surnames are derived from what they did. What they did. We are Christians. It means that Christ lives in us. We carry his very name. It would be great if people knew you for your values and your devotion and your life of praise and your love for God. Isn't that how people should know us? And the fact that we love one another. So what's in us comes out. But it's good what comes out, not bad. Anybody reading that? Anybody agree with that? So we are to show forth Jesus Christ in our lives. But I'm interested when Jesus said, a city set on the hill cannot be hidden. Let's go to the next slide, please, Sonia. So we've got the verse up there from Matthew 5:14. I'm really interested in this because a city is a place where people live, not just where people visit. When he says be a city set on a hill, he talked about, really, next slide please, living on a hill. This is how we ought to live. Now, let me take you back a few years when I was first called into the ministry. I was an assistant, full-time assistant pastor at my home church before I went to Bible college. But the Lord said, I'm sending you away to Bible college. And I was in an Hallam church, my home church in Southport, and working with a great man, my senior pastor, fantastic guy, Don Sanford. And the Lord said to me, no, I'm sending you to college. And I really didn't want to go. And I told everyone I wasn't going to college anyway. I didn't need to go to college, I said, so I wasn't going. And then the Lord said, no, son, you're going. And they ended up crossing the great chasm from the Hallam to the Assemblies of God. That was tough. And I had to travel from the west of the country to the east of the country to Mattersey Hall. Some of you know this story, most of you won't know it. And I got on the train from Southport, I went to Wigan, changed at Wigan, went to Manchester, changed at Manchester, went to Sheffield, changed at Sheffield, went to Doncaster, changed at Doncaster, went to Retford, taxi to college. How about that, guys? All I did was travel 100 miles. Anyway, amazing. And I got off the train. The one change I had to make was I got off the train at Manchester Victoria and I got the shuttle bus to Manchester Piccadilly. That took almost as long as the journey from Southport. So anyway. And while I was there, well, what have I been? 23? And I was there on the shuttle bus and I remember saying to myself, thank God I know that I'll never be called to this city. I looked at the people in Manchester, in the streets of Manchester, and I used to go, ew. I said, Lord, thank you that I'll not be coming to this place. See, in my mind, in my mind, I was going to go back to my home church or something. Or, better still, I was going to get a church in a village. Because I was in farming. When I was 15 and left school, I went into farming. I was a tractor driver. I loved farm work, loved the countryside. I just do not like cities. In fact, I always said, worst place, not going to live in a city, going to be a farmer, have some land and farm. It's all I wanted to do, wasn't it, love? Here I am going through my, thinking, thank the Lord I've not been called here. So, I end up coming out of college and I get this appointment to Edenwood in County Durham. Beautiful village. I thought, this is it. Fantastic. Church of about 35, 40 people max. 40 people if you're Australian. No, 50 if you're Aussie. And fantastic, absolutely brilliant. I thought, this is the place for me. And I preached there and they wanted me to go. When I got back, an amazing thing happened. You all know what it's like to have peace in your heart, yeah? Over something. How many people know what it's like to have peace over something? How many people know what the opposite of peace is? Does anybody? I'm not sure there's a word in English for it, but the opposite of peace is a lot of things. Turbulence, anxiety. What did you say, Alex? Turmoil, yeah. Just no peace whatsoever. So they wrote to me and said, Paul, we'd like you to come as the pastor. And I had to write back. It was the hardest letter I had to write. I had to write back and said, I'm sorry, I cannot come. I have no peace, and I cannot come if I have no peace. They wrote back and said, but God's told us you're the man. No pressure. I said, I'm sorry, but God hasn't told me that. And I refused to go, and I remember thinking, do you know when I refused and it was categorically, I said that, so I'm not going, the peace of God overwhelmed me. Then I got another opportunity to go to Wigan, to the Assemblies of God, great church, knew the pastor, Ray Belfield, his sons are good friends of mine, David and Andrew. And I thought, this is it. And I was going to go there in charge of evangelism in what was a 400 plus strong church. Really, this is it. The Lord said no. Then all of a sudden the Lord said something will come out of the blue. You have to wait. I waited for 3 months. If anybody knows me, I do not have patience. Even now after 30 years, I'm probably on the Richter scale. I've just moved up the needles move 1 micromillimeter on patience. And I'm still working at that side of things, okay? But in that time, I got a phone call from the Wirral Christian Centre. Paul Epton Birkenhead wanted me to go and be in charge of evangelism in the north end of Birkenhead and work on the Wirral and all that. I knew it was from the Lord. I went. But this is the point. 6 months later, when I was loving it, being in the ministry and everything, there was some power struggle going on in Hallam. I can say this now because I've all retired. There was a power struggle going on in Hallam, and they said, we're not going to let you stay there because Paul brought you without our say-so. So to make a point to Paul, we're going to move you where we want you to go. I said, fine. I'm just fine with, I submit to spiritual authority. Listen, guys, submit to it. Wherever you want to send me, send me. I'm fine with it because I actually believe God is with me. And that's what I believe. God. So they said, right, you're going to Barmouth. I said, fantastic. Where is it? Barmouth, population, 10,000 in the summer, 2,000 in the winter. 12,000 if you count the seagulls. So we went to Barmouth. We saw the church building that was hanging on the side of a cliff with wet rot, dry rot, and every rot. Inside and out, if you get what I'm saying. 20 people on a good day, 25 if you're an Aussie. I said to Mags, what a great opportunity. She said, yeah. we were on the way, weren't we? We were on the way to Bournemouth. We were going to see Bournemouth turned over for Jesus. So exciting. Then I get a phone call, meet us on the M6. I went to meet the field superintendent going out and the field superintendent coming in, who were having a little bit of, shall I say, mild disagreement as regards stationing. And it was on the M6 over dinner that they decided they're sending me to Manchester. Now I'm saying that because I hadn't got a Scooby-Doo clue what was happening. I learned that verse, the lot is cast into the lap, but the disposing is of the Lord. And just to trust in the Lord. So it doesn't matter where you're headed or where people think you're headed, as long as where God knows you're headed, that's what you put your trust in. Now here's the rub. Here's the thing I want to say to you. So, I'm going to Manchester. I think, a city? I'm going to a city. I'm going to that city that I used to travel through on the shuttle bus, and I used to say, Lord, thank God you never sending me there. I know you never sending me there. And you know the thing about it all? Now, I don't just have one city, I've got two. Manchester and Salford. How amazing is God? How good is God? And you know something? The greatest place to live in the universe for me is Manchester. Sorry, and Salford for those. I have to keep Alex happy because he's really into Salford. We're a Manchester church in Salford, in a Salford building. That's how I keep saying it. I know Alex likes to be Salford, but he lives in Stretford. Anyway, but I'm just sharing that with you. Jesus said a city. The thing about cities is there's loads of people in the cities. Loads of people are there. And that's where Jesus wants us to be light and salt. It's important that Jesus is preached in the villages and the towns and the communities. But when Paul went out on his missionary journeys, he went to the big cities. He went to all the cities around to preach the gospel wherever he went. And he was a trailblazer in his day and age. And I'll come back to that in a moment. It's really, really important. And Jesus wants us. The Lord wants us to be cities on a hill. He wants us to be a lamp on a stand. Listen, when Paul went out on his missionary journeys and reached communities and reached people everywhere in cities, towns, villages, areas, regions, right, loads of them, that was fantastic. But then he got locked up in a prison cell. Now here's what I want to say to you. There's lots of us who think we can't shine the light because of the dark place we're in at the moment. And one of the main things I want to say this morning, that if you're in a dark place today, you can shine brighter, bigger, further, wider, more powerful than anywhere else. Paul the Apostle from his prison cell reached more people with the pen and by writing than he ever did by going all over the world. Why was that? Because he just shined Jesus. Because he knew what it was to be radiant for Jesus Christ. And you can be too. And by the way, that's before Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and all the rest of it. I saw a tweet the other day, Philippians 3:14, I press towards the goal. How amazing Paul is still speaking on social media 2,000 years after his missionary journeys. That came out of the prison cell. That came out of the prison cell. Because a lamp on a stand is seen by everyone. Put your lamp on the stand today. It was Paul and Silas who were locked up in prison. And he says at midnight, the darkest hour at midnight, what did they do? Woe is me. Oh, I can't believe it. Where we were preaching and teaching the gospel. We've been beaten, we've been whipped, we've been battered, we've been bruised. We're locked up in here. Where is the Lord? No. They sang praise. They shone the light of the glorious gospel, and wow, bang, earthquake comes and they're released. Why? Because they are determined to be radiant in the place of darkness. What place are you in today? I was saying at the 9 o'clock service, how about this? I said today that there's people in a place of darkness. You're in a place of darkness, it's tough. It could be a place where you've lost a loved one, something happened, I don't know. But you can still shine where you are. And I said that, and a guy came to me after the 9 o'clock service, he says, Pastor Paul, he says, you've no idea. He says, I work in an underground car park. And it's so dark, and it's so difficult. Phil and I, you were with me, Phil, when he says, it made me realise I can be a light in that dark place. Isn't that amazing how God speaks into our situations? I had no idea about that. But I want to say to you today, be a light in an age that is crying out for truth. In an age that's crying out for real, true, sincere, authentic light. Be a light that shines in the darkness. There's darkness around you where you may be tomorrow. Take the light. Be the light. Shine the light in those situations. Paul the Apostle talks about being ambassadors for Christ. Taking the kingdom into your situations. Being a letter known and read of all men in 2 Corinthians 3, verse 20, he talks about that. I'm just going to finish off because time's gone and we're going to just worship.